Hi everyone, it's Zin. What's up? Long time no see. I wanted to make a video today on how to actually be productive. I feel like some of us sometimes we fall by the wayside or our schedules become a little bit out of whack and then we're not as productive anymore. But these are just some things that really worked for me over the years, kind of like a mind shift change. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Zin. I am a doctor in the US. I'm in my first year of residency training. For my specialty, I'm going into dermatology, and then we have to do an intern year, a prelim year, a transitional year before we go into our advanced specialty. Now, getting into medical school, trying to become a doctor in the US is already very difficult on its own. And then I got into dermatology, which is one of the most competitive, if not arguably the most competitive specialty to get into. So there were a lot of things kind of that worked for me in life and through med school to basically just keep being productive. I took a couple of gap years before medical school, so I was considered a non-traditional student, and I realized my mind shift because of, the gap years I took and also the way I grew up kind of made it a little bit different than the way I went about things and thought about things compared to some of my peers. I wasn't necessarily smarter or more hardworking than any of my peers. There were definitely people who were way smarter, did a lot more than I did, but like I said, it was just habits that I've built that made it so I never fell by the wayside. So the first tip I want to talk about is actually setting short-term goals for your long-term goals. Goals are goals, they're things that you want to do, but you have to set yourself a to-do list in place before you ever reach it. For example, you can say, oh, I want to do well in med school, I want to try my best, but unless you actually break it down how you want to accomplish that, it's not very helpful. Let's take money for an example, right? You can say, oh, I want to buy a new car, that could be your long-term goal, but no, it's actually how much do you want to save in a year? How much do you want to save in a couple months? How much do you want to save in a week? You don't have to narrow it down for that type of goal by seconds or minutes or days or whatever, but you do have to have a general idea of what you can do, and then you automate however you're able to automate your short-term goals, right? Let's say you want to save $6,000 in a year, so every month you want to save $500. Every 2 weeks that's $250, and then you can set it as oh, every week or every paycheck this amount of money gets deducted from my bank account. But then let's say you want to save that much in a year, it's then you have to think about oh, what do you want to cut back on? How can you make more money? You can save a little bit less and still reach your goals if you're willing to work more for money. The second hack or tip I want to talk about is to basically biohack yourself. There are a lot of different ways, I think, to biohack yourself. Us as humans, intrinsically, we have these patterns that we follow and conditioning that we can do to ourselves. One thing a lot of medical students and people in general kind of suffer from is dopamine, right? We have this dopamine rush in our everyday lives. It's very popular nowadays to talk about dopamine detox. We're constantly on our phones, we're getting overstimulated, and it's then we can't be as productive, and it's how can we combat that? The easiest way to kind of just get rid of all that dopamine is to delete your social media apps or delete the video games from your phone. So that way you're not tempted to kind of check them when you wake up. And it doesn't mean oh, you have to delete your account or delete it forever. You can re-download it after a test or something like that. I think social media is a great way to be social, and that includes catching up with friends and family from a long time ago to see how they're doing, but that doesn't mean you need to check on it every single day. You can do other things, you can FaceTime your friends, you can text them, you can just see them in person. I would constantly do this thing in medical school where I would just delete Instagram off of my phone, and my friends would be like, hey Zen, did you see that reel I sent you? I'm like, no, not yet, I'll see it in a couple weeks. They're just what do you mean? I'm like, yeah, I deleted Instagram so I can study for this test, and then I'll re-download it after my exam. But I think it's just a really simple way to keep yourself kind of accountable without actually having to. Like I said, there are a lot of different biohacks out there. You just have to kind of find what works for you. Another one that I did in college, I had the most difficult time waking up for class. I commuted, so I had to wake up an hour before, to drive to school for 30 minutes, and then I had to find parking, and I had to do all this stuff. And it was so hard for me to get to my 8 a.m. classes because I would just constantly snooze my alarm. I would constantly be late to class, so late to the point where I was I don't even want to go anymore. And then every single time, I remember I showed up to this business class. It was 8:30. The professor was upset at me. I was upset at myself. And then I had no idea what went on in the first 30 minutes because I was a freshman and I knew nobody in that class. and I had no idea what homework assignment he assigned, and it was so embarrassing to like go up and ask him like, hey, I'm sorry I missed the 30 minutes, because I was like late all the time. Anyway, so then one time I came across YouTube. I forgot what it was called. It was called conditioning or entrainment or something like that, and you basically biohack your body to wake up to alarm clocks more efficiently. This was such a long time ago, like I can't even find the video anymore, but it's basically like you set your alarm at nighttime, and then you pretend to go to sleep, and then your alarm goes off, and then you just immediately you wake up, you pretend to wake up, you pretend to go to the bathroom, you pretend to brush your teeth. Like you don't actually have to do all this stuff, but it's the act of actually like getting out of your bed, going to the bathroom, and then you would come back, and then afterwards you would calm down, set your alarm again, and then you go back to sleep. And then it could be like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. Then your alarm goes off again, and then you wake up, you pretend to wake up, you pretend to go to the bathroom, you pretend to brush your teeth, then you come back into bed, and you do that a couple of times throughout the night. And this actually worked. I did this maybe 7-8 years ago, and to this day, I still am able to wake up from alarms like from the very first ring. I never usually need to set more than 2 alarms. And even if I do, it's not to actually wake up, it's just to make me feel safer about it. But yeah, even now, if I have to wake up at 4 a.m., it's not really difficult for me to do. Like I'll dread it, but I can actually do it without worrying that I'll oversleep. The only con about this is if somebody else's alarm goes off, I also wake up, and that can be really annoying. So let's say you live with like a roommate or family members that set their alarm, like have a million different alarms. I cannot go back to sleep after. But I think the benefits outweigh the cons for that one. I think there are probably better YouTube videos and probably books you can read on this. Another one I heard that people do is they do the 3-2-1 method, right? You count down in your head, 3, 2, 1, and then you just wake up. I think we all heard that Atomic Habits quote. It's like you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Aside from that, you hear from everybody, you have to nail your systems mentally. I think we always think when we reach that goal, we're going to be this specific person, but in reality, you have to become this type of person before you ever reach that goal. What do I mean by that? It sounds kind of like hoo-ha, right? It kind of sounds a little bit like, oh, manifesting and then like doing all that. But let me give you an example. So right now, I'm a doctor. When I introduce myself as a doctor, when someone else introduces me as a doctor, when people find out I'm a doctor, they assume these things about me. They assume that I'm smart, they assume I'm hardworking, they assume I'm trustworthy, but in reality, I've always been those things. I mean, yeah, now that I have the credential and I have, more of a track record for being that type of person, and now I have more of the knowledge because of medical school or studying or whatever, it might just be more experience doing all of those things. But in reality, I was always that person. Because of medical school and because of college, I've done some things more consistently and longer over time. But those values, habits, type of person I am, it's never changed. If you want to become a doctor, like you already have to become those things. Like you're not magically going to become those things one day when you get into med school or when you graduate from med school. One thing I think about a lot is like, I want to become a mother one day, right? But I've always been told by my friends that I'm very maternal, that I care a lot, I have a great heart. You have to become that person before you actually become that role. That's not to say you can't learn on the way, you absolutely can. But just falling to the level of your systems mentally helps you become that person that you want to be in your head. So even on a really long day, like I'll still walk a little at the gym or I'll still cook dinner. On a really bad day, my sleep schedule is still pretty consistent, and I'm still able to study a little, even if I've had a really mentally numbing day. You have to become a gym person before you become consistent at the gym. You have to kind of see yourself as somebody who goes to the gym. Why do you want to go to the gym? Oh, because I want to be healthy forever. I want to be able to do X, Y, and Z when I'm like however years old. And then you think about the dream version of yourself, right? The person that goes to the gym all the time. You have to go all the time now in order to be that person who goes all the time. Like if you want to be the type of person that's always in shape, like you have to mimic those habits now. The version of you that's in shape will still probably go to the gym even if they're having a really bad day. And my other tip is to actually know what matters. Not everything matters, and you'll end up wasting a lot of your energy doing things that just don't create an outcome. That's not to say you can't have hobbies and do all these things that just make you happy. That's perfectly okay. But in terms of the bulk of your energy, you really have to know kind of where to allocate it. Like I said before, I was not the smartest person in my medical school class. I was not even the type of person to study the most efficiently. I just study as efficiently as I can. I had some classmates that studied literally 24/7. Like they would wake up, they only get 3 hours of sleep, they would study from like day to night. And those people did really well. Even one of them became the valedictorian of our medical school class. That being said, we had tests and exams and board exams, and you kind of had to know what really mattered. Like studying like 5 hours for like this one tiny quiz that's worth like 1% of your grade versus studying for a big exam that's worth like 50-60% of your grade is a lot different. There's nothing wrong with the people who kind of sought out knowledge and studied for those little like cases or quizzes that we had, and they ended up being, really knowledgeable in that one topic. So there's nothing wrong with that, especially if you find interest in it. But to know how to do that kind of consistently does take a little bit of practice of letting go of things, even if it means like, oh, you failed this one quiz, like what's the end goal? It's like you failed this one quiz that didn't mean much in order to pass the exam that determines your grade. Another thing in work and school is knowing how to allocate your work and your social life. If you derive a lot of happiness out of your social life, like maybe you want to be able to just pass school or just get by and work in order to have a really good social life. Maybe you're the type of person that doesn't care about getting promotions and you'd rather spend that time with your kids and your family, and that's perfectly okay. And I feel like a lot of my classmates in medical school didn't come to that realization until after they matched. They get into these super hard residencies that they have to work like 80 hours a week, and then they realize it's not worth it, and some of them even end up changing specialties. And then there were some of us, me included, who knew like, oh, we had to work really hard in med school and that it was kind of a means to an end in order to have a career, a family, like a social life that we were kind of happy with. And then when I mean social life, I also mean kind of like lifestyle and just living life in general. That being said, your productivity, your efficiency is not going to look like everybody else's. There's all these like productivity gurus on YouTube and the space that always kind of talk about like how to be the most efficient. There's also this term called like min-maxing, and it's like how to get the most efficiency out of everything that you do, including the gym, including work, 5 a.m. morning routines. And that doesn't have to be your life. You just work and do whatever works for you. For me, in medical school, I had a great work-life balance, but it also meant that I gave up my weekends and Friday nights. But for somebody like me, I don't even like going to the clubs and stuff on Friday nights and weekend nights with my classmates. I like to do chill things like invite friends over, cook for them. And because I did these kind of chill things, like you didn't need to recover all night from them, so I ended up doing those things on the weeknights, for example. Maybe your values are different so that you can make your productivity work that way for you. If you want to time block your family time, that's perfectly okay. If you want to time block the time you spend studying or working, I think for someone like me, that would make more sense, right? Like I spent X amount of hours on this job, and then the rest of the time, like I have the rest of the day to spend with my friends and family. Maybe you derive a lot of your happiness and social life from eating with friends. If you're the type of person who really values fresh, amazing food and you like going out to restaurants, like that's okay. But if you're the type of person that only sees food as sustenance, maybe something like meal prepping makes more sense to you. This also depends on what kind of stage of life you're in, right? There are some times in your life where you have to really struggle and be productive, and then there are other times of your life where you can kind of let go and be okay with that. All that being said, like not all levels of productivity, especially at different times in your life, have to be measured the same as somebody else's. And my last tip is like you have to know what is in your control and to kind of let go of what isn't. I really struggled with this in medical school because I am the type of person that I think as long as I work harder, I can probably reach my goals. Like I'm a little bit delulu in that sense too. I think if I'm not able to reach a certain metric, like I just have to work harder. I think if I can't get to my goals, like, oh, if I work harder, if I sleep less, if I do more, then I can probably do it. But in reality, not all of us are built the same and not all of us have the same resources or privileges. I had classmates that were way smarter, and some of them were way smarter because they studied so much more because they had the resources to be able to do that. They had all of their bills taken care of, they had food delivered to their home, they had a house cleaner come in to clean their place. And then there were people who were also inherently smart, and that was incredibly frustrating because these people would literally do less than you and be able to ace their exams because of the way they grew up, because of all the prep classes they went to, because of genetics. And I hate to say that. I'm not saying you can't measure up to these people, but I'm saying you don't always have to. Like, you don't have to struggle and kind of be so hard on yourselves because you don't have these resources and because you didn't grow up a certain way. You kind of just have to make do with whatever you have. One other thing I struggled with in medical school was kind of just like vocabulary and English in general. So I grew up in the US. My English is not bad, but at the end of the day, like, I went to Philadelphia public schools growing up. And if anybody watched Abbott Elementary, you kind of know how that is. I didn't feel like I had the best education growing up. Those struggles kind of compound as you get into college and get into medical school. Like, there were words in question stems on the board exams and in med school exams where I just didn't know what a word meant, or even like what continent this country was in. Like, just small little things like that. Whereas like someone who grew up more cultured, they would know the vocabulary, they would kind of know where these areas were located. And you know, that would sometimes be the key to finding out like what the answer was on the exam. And I didn't travel outside the US. I wasn't very cultured or anything like that. I wasn't going to spend my time learning about every single country in order to know which diseases came from where. It wasn't worth my time to kind of learn like 100 hours worth of geography for a single quiz when I had 100 other things to study on that were either related to medicine or whatnot. And even the vocabulary, like, as an adult, I'm still learning a lot of SAT words that I probably should have learned when I was in high school. And I had to kind of let go of that fact, right? Like, if that kind of question came up on the exam, I wasn't going to know the answer. I could do a complete guess and have a 25% or 20% chance of being right. If I knew it was going to be a quiz about like infectious diseases from all these different countries, I knew I wasn't going to get a perfect score in that quiz. And I kind of had to just let go of that fact. Anyway, I hope this video was helpful. I tried to make it so it wasn't like generic advice that you kind of always hear. And these are things that genuinely worked for me. I hope you guys are kind of able to reach your goals, and I hope these tips were helpful, and I'll see you again next time. Bye!